At Christmas dinner, my daughter told 40 people I didn't deserve presents. Hello, my name is David Harper, and most people around town know me as the guy who fixes his own truck, shovels his neighbor's driveway before sunrise, and still says ma'am to cashiers half his age. 68 years old, retired civil engineer, widower. I've lived in the same small Colorado house for 34 years. It creaks in winter, leaks a little in spring, but it's home. After my wife Laura passed, I stayed busy. Work, community projects, building benches for the local park. Anything that kept me from sitting too long with the silence. My daughter Emily was the bright spot that kept me steady. She had Laura's sharp eyes and her fire. But where Laura's fire warmed people, Emily sometimes burned them. I wanted her to have a better life than we did. So when my father, Walter Harper, passed and left me a considerable inheritance, I decided to use part of it for Emily. I set up a private account, structured. It's so that the monthly $10,000 transfers looked like returns from Laura's old family investment fund. I figured it would protect her pride, keep her believing her success came from her own hard work. 12 years, 144 payments, over $1.4 million, and not once did I mention it. She'd call me every few weeks, mostly out of habit. Hey, Dad, can you proof my business proposal? Or you still using that old flip phone? Always polite but distant. I didn't mind. I told myself, this is how independence looks. Emily's life became the kind you see in glossy magazines, designer handbags, ski weekends, charity galas. Her fiancé, Tyler Grant, a real estate agent with perfect teeth and a hollow laugh, made sure to post every meal they ate online. I never disliked the boy. I just never saw him talk about anything deeper than interest rates or bottle service. When she announced that Christmas dinner would be at her new place, a downtown penthouse with a skyline view, as she called it, I didn't argue. She wanted to host to show everyone the life she'd built. I let her. Parents let their kids play grown-up, even when they know who's been keeping the lights on. That evening, I arrived with a bottle of bourbon and an old wooden carving Laura had made back in '94, a snowflake pattern she used to hang above the mantel every December. Emily took it with a tight smile. Thanks, Dad, she said. Maybe we'll put it in the guest room. The style's a bit rustic for the main space, rustic. That was her new word for anything that reminded her of where she came from. The condo was packed, 30 people at least. Cousins, friends, business partners. Tyler moved through the room like a salesman at an open house, bragging about their custom lighting fixtures and European marble. Emily laughed at all the right moments. The perfect hostess. I sat near the end of the 12-foot table watching her move. She looked happy, or at least well-rehearsed. Dinner was fine, though I mostly listened. When talk turned to careers, Emily launched into a story about building herself from the ground up. I mean, my parents did what they could, she said, swirling her wine. But I learned early on not to rely on anyone else. That's how you make it in this world. A few guests nodded. Tyler smirked. Someone asked, Emily, what's your dad do now? Oh, he's retired, she said with a dismissive laugh. He used to design bridges or something. But he's never really been ambitious. Not like Mom was. A quiet ripple went through the table. I smiled, took a sip of water, and said nothing. Laura had been a teacher. The most ambitious thing she ever did was raise Emily to believe in herself. I guess she succeeded a little too well. After dessert, Emily announced it was time for presents. Piles of glossy boxes surrounded the tree, bows shining under the chandelier. She passed them out one by one, to Tyler, to her friends, to every cousin and co-worker. When the last ribbon was torn and the laughter filled the room, I realized my lap was empty. She looked at me, then gave that rehearsed little smirk. Don't look so surprised, Dad, she said. Some people don't deserve gifts every year. You taught me that, right? Earn what you get? The room went quiet, then broke into uneasy chuckles. Someone said, she's just teasing. But she wasn't. I caught her eyes, cold, proud, unshaken. I just smiled and nodded. Guess you're right, I said softly. She didn't notice the way my hand brushed my watch, noting the time. December 25th, 8:17 p.m., the moment my daughter forgot where her gifts really came from. The drive home that night was quiet. Too quiet for Christmas. Snow fell in soft sheets against the windshield, the wipers keeping rhythm with my thoughts. I replayed Emily's words, the way she laughed at me in front of everyone, her voice dripping with pride that wasn't hers to begin with. But anger wasn't what I felt. Not really. It was something colder. Disappointment layered with years of quiet giving. When I got home, I hung up my coat, poured a glass of bourbon, and went to my study, the only room in the house that still smelled like Laura's old books and cedar polish. I opened the drawer on the right side of my desk and pulled out a worn leather binder, the Harper Family Trust. 12 years ago, I'd added one particular clause, one that my father Walter had suggested decades earlier. He used to say, "A gift without gratitude turns to rust." The clause allowed the trustee, me, to suspend or revoke distributions if the beneficiary displayed consistent disregard or contempt toward the source of funds. At the time, I'd included it half-jokingly. Now the ink on that clause looked prophetic. The next morning, I called Tom Grayson, my financial advisor. Tom had been with me since before Emily was born, a straight-talking man who treated numbers like oaths. "Morning, Tom," I said. "David, Merry Christmas, well, the day after. How was dinner?" "Enlightening," I replied. "I need to discuss a change to the trust. Effective immediately." There was a pause. "You serious?" "It's been stable for over a decade." "I'm serious. Suspend all distributions to Emily Harper as of this morning. Freeze the sub-account tied to her condo payments and vehicle lease. Redirect any remaining unallocated interest back into the parent fund." Tom hesitated. "That'll hit her hard, David. You sure you don't want to warn her?" "I already did," I said quietly. "She just didn't realize it yet." By New Year's Eve, the first ripples began. A declined payment on Emily's Audi lease. A voicemail from her credit card company. 2 days later, a text. "Emily, hey Dad. Weird question. Did the bank change something with the family account?" My transfers didn't go through. I stared at the screen. Then typed back, "Me. Everything changes eventually. Maybe it's time to see what you can build without the training wheels." No reply came. A week later, she showed up at my house. Not called. Just arrived, her SUV parked sideways in the snow. She was still in her expensive coat. Still carried herself like the world owed her a red carpet. But there was a tremor in her voice this time. "Dad, what the hell did you do?" I motioned for her to come in. "Coffee?" "I don't want coffee," she snapped. "Tyler and I got a notice from the leasing office. The rent payment bounced. My car payment too. They said the account's been frozen. You're the trustee." "Fix it," I nodded, calm. "You know, Emily, I remember when you were 10. You built that birdhouse with me in the garage. Spent the whole day sanding the corners, painting it blue. Then when it cracked, you cried for an hour. You said, 'Dad, I worked so hard on it.' And I told you that's what makes it special and because it was yours. Dad, I don't have time for this sentimental crap." I looked her in the eye. "That's the problem, Em. You haven't had to work for a thing in 12 years. You've been living inside a birdhouse I built." Her face went pale. "What are you talking about?" "The trust," I said, opening the binder on the table. "Every cent you've lived on the condo, the car, the trips, and it came from this. From me. I hid it because I didn't want to embarrass you. I wanted you to feel independent." "But you mistook it for entitlement," she stepped back. "You're lying." "Mom said, your mother didn't have a secret fund. I made it look like she did because she wanted you to believe in yourself. And you did, just not in the right way." Emily's voice cracked. "So what now? You're just cutting me off?" "I'm giving you a chance," I said softly. "To see who you really are when you're not standing on someone else's foundation." She turned to leave but stopped at the door. "You think this makes you noble? You're punishing me for not worshiping you." "No," I said, staring at the falling snow outside. "I'm teaching you what gratitude costs when it's forgotten." That night I sat back down at the desk and logged into the trust account. The cursor blinked under a column labeled Beneficiary Activity. Next to Emily's name, I added a note. Suspension initiated. Pending reassessment upon demonstration of humility and reconciliation. Then I closed the binder, turned off the light, and whispered to the empty room. Lesson 1 begins. 3 weeks. That's how long it took for Emily's world to start cracking, not with a bang, but with the slow, brittle sound of ice under weight. The first call came from her condo manager, then the car dealership, then her fiancé Tyler. Each one a reminder that her once endless stream of money had suddenly gone dry. And beneath all the noise, I sat quietly in my workshop, sanding the edge of a small wooden birdhouse. The same one she and I had started years ago. The one she never finished painting. It started with a voicemail. Emily. Dad, the bank says the trust account's been restructured. I don't understand what that means. I need you to call me back. I didn't. Instead, I called Tom Grayson, my advisor, one last time. Freeze remains active? I asked. Fully, he replied. Her accounts are at zero until she petitions you for reinstatement. You still want to hold? Yes, I said, running my thumb over the splintered wood. She needs to understand the difference between income and inheritance. A few days later, Emily went digging. She logged into her online banking, then deeper, tracing through old wire histories, tax filings, and archived emails. Somewhere along the way, she found the document, the Harper family trust deed, scanned and time-stamped 12 years ago. She clicked it open. Her eyes caught the name in black ink at the bottom. Trustee David Harper. And for the first time, the story she'd believed, that her mother's investments funded her life, began to unravel. She called Tyler immediately. Did you know this? My dad's been the one sending the money, all of it. Tyler paused. Does it matter? It's still yours. No, she said softly, shaking her head. It's not. Meanwhile, I was already planning my next move. I drafted a letter, not to hurt her but to guide her. Emily, pride is easy when life is padded. You've built an image, not a life. You can rebuild, but not until you stop seeing me as an obstacle and start seeing me as the foundation. If you're ready to learn what your mother and I truly left you, come home. The door's not locked on, but you'll have to walk through it on your own. Dad, I didn't send it yet. She wasn't ready. By mid-February, I got another text. Emily, I got a job offer, marketing coordinator. It's small, but it's mine. Thought you'd want to know. I smiled. The ice was starting to crack in the right places. That night, I went to my study and opened the trust binder again. Under her name, I added a new note. Observation. Signs of growth. Employment secured. Pride softening. I closed the binder and whispered, Almost there, Em. But the real test came later. A close friend of mine, a quiet investor named Margaret Ellis, agreed to interview Emily for a second position. Margaret ran a small engineering charity funded, ironically, by the same trust income Emily had once lived on. When Margaret asked why she wanted the job, Emily didn't talk about the money or prestige. She said, I need to earn something real. My father gave me everything and I treated it like air, invisible until it was gone. That night, Margaret called me. David, your daughter's changing. Slowly, but she is. I stared at the half-finished birdhouse on my desk, the paintbrush resting beside it. Then it's time, I said, to unfreeze the stream, just a trickle. I authorized a small monthly transfer, not $10,000 but $500, labeled educational reinvestment. Just enough for her to feel momentum, not dependence. I didn't sign it, Dad. I signed it the Harper Foundation because the lesson wasn't over, but she was finally learning to read it. By the time December rolled around again, almost a year since that quiet Christmas humiliation, Emily called me for the first time without asking for anything. Her voice was smaller, steadier. Dad, she said, I'm hosting a Christmas dinner this year. My place isn't big, but I'd like you to come. I paused. The same date, the same dinner. Only this time the invitation came wrapped in humility instead of entitlement. I'll be there, I said softly. When I arrived, her condo was different. No glittering designer decorations, no champagne tower. Just a modest tree with handmade ornaments, the kind her mother used to make. The air smelled like roast chicken and cinnamon. Tyler wasn't there. I didn't ask. At the table sat a few of her co-workers, not the influencer crowd, just regular folks. They looked at me warmly like they'd heard good things. She pulled out my chair herself, her eyes meeting mine with something that used to be rare, respect. Dinner went quietly at first. Laughter, small stories, easy warmth. Then when everyone started opening gifts, I noticed a small white box in front of my plate. My name was written on it, carefully, almost shyly. I hesitated before opening it. Inside was a silver key. Emily, I asked. She took a breath. It's a key to your old house. I bought it back, Dad. I sold the Audi, cleared the lease, and used what I saved from work. It's not perfect yet. Still smells like new paint. But it's yours again. The room went quiet. I looked at her, and for a moment I saw both the child I'd raised and the woman she'd fought to become. You didn't have to. I did, she interrupted softly, because you already gave me everything. I just didn't see it. Then she stood and handed me a small stack of papers. They're copies of the trust records, she said. Every transfer you made. Every payment. I had them printed so I'd never forget again. I flipped through them slowly. The dates, the amounts, the handwritten notations. My handwriting, but something caught my eye. A new line at the very end. Harper Reinvestment Initiative. Phase 2. I looked up. You started something? She smiled a little nervous. I did. It's a mentorship fund for students from our town. Engineering and architecture scholarships. Named after Grandpa Walter and you. She turned the final page toward me. The program's motto was printed in bold. We build what we're grateful for. My throat tightened. I hadn't expected that. I set the papers down and said quietly, You know, last Christmas you told me some people don't deserve gifts. She nodded, eyes wet. I was one of them. For a moment there was nothing but silence, the kind that carries both regret and relief. Then I reached across the table, took her hand and said, You finally learned the hardest lesson of all. Not how to earn money, but how to honor it. She smiled through tears. You taught me that. The hard way. After everyone left, I lingered by the window looking out at the quiet snow falling over the streetlights. Emily came to stand beside me. You know, Dad, she said softly, I used to think love was giving people what they asked for, but now I think it's giving them what they need, even if they hate you for it. I turned to her, my voice just above a whisper. Your mother would have said the same. When I left that night, I locked the door behind me, not because I was afraid it might close again, but because it finally felt like home again. And as I stepped out into the snow, I looked at the silver key in my palm and thought, some gifts don't come wrapped in paper. They come wrapped in lessons. Before end, if you really love my story, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Now back to the story. A year later, Christmas morning came quietly. No grand feast, no crowded house, no arguments. Just the low hum of the heater, the smell of coffee, and a blanket of white resting over my porch in Colorado. I was sitting in the same armchair I'd once stared out from after Laura passed, the one that used to feel too big, too empty. But now, for the first time in a long while, it felt peaceful. The house was mine again, technically and spiritually. Fresh paint on the walls, new frames with old memories, a life rebuilt without noise. And on the coffee table sat a single card delivered 2 days earlier, written in neat blue ink. Dad, no gifts this year. Just gratitude. Thank you for letting me fall, and for standing quietly when I finally looked up. Emily, I read it twice, maybe 3 times before setting it beside the old birdhouse I'd finally finished. It wasn't perfect, paint smudged, corners uneven, but it didn't have to be. Perfection had never built a thing worth keeping. That afternoon, I drove to the community center on Pine Street, the new headquarters of the Harper Reinvestment Initiative. The sign out front read, Founded in memory of Walter and Laura Harper, managed by Emily and David Harper. Inside, I found Emily leading a small group of students through an orientation. She looked different, grounded, confident, not the woman who once mocked humility, but one who'd finally learned its strength. When she spotted me, she smiled. No awkwardness, no need for words, just understanding. She handed me a clipboard, grinning. We're short on volunteers for the mentorship board. Think you can handle another project? I laughed softly. I'll see what I can do. Later, as we walked out to the parking lot, snow starting to fall again, she said, You know, last year I thought losing the money was the worst thing that could happen. But if you hadn't stopped it, I never would have found myself. I looked at her, the cold air turning our breath to mist. That's the thing about building bridges, Em. Sometimes you have to burn one before you remember why it was there. She smiled faintly. And sometimes the silence after is the real gift. That night back home, I turned off the lights and sat by the window, the glow from the street lamp spilling across the birdhouse on the sill. I could almost hear Laura's voice, soft, steady. You did right by her, David. You both finally built something real. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, the house stayed still, not empty, not lonely. Just full of quiet, earned peace. I took one last sip of coffee, set the cup down and whispered to no one in particular, "Merry Christmas, Laura." She finally found her way home. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to say anything more. The silence said it all.